Okay, so we started talking about this last week, and again, we did talk a little bit about being proactive, and now we're coming back to that subject and going into more depth. And again, last week we talked what the definition was in proactive, and we'll come back and see what Dr. Covey says in a few seconds here. But let me kind of also go back. Let me. Oops, now you can't see it at all. Okay, what color is that? How many say A is black? I mean, isn't it black? See, you think this is a trick question, right? You say, I thought it was black, but not anymore. Uh, how many think it's black? How many think it's not black? You got it there first. Okay. How about B? How many think that B is black? How many think that B is white? How many think that A and B are the same color? Well, they are. A and B are the same color. Your brain won't let you see it. No matter what your hands say, you cannot see that A and B are the same color. Our brain will not allow us to see that. Our brains tell us what it should be, not what it is. And so A and B are exactly, this is A and B down here, where somebody's actually gone up and with some software pulled out a little bit of each other and put out here to prove to themselves that what they were told was true. They are really the same. Now, I told you before, there's lots of ways we can trick our minds, our constructive, our conceptual framework we build, fools our minds, even our eyes get full sometimes. And we expect to see something, such as this, we see it. And even if I tell you that A and B are the same, you cannot see that they're the same. It's not like that. I showed you last class of the young woman and the old woman. That way you can gradually figure it out and see the both. This you cannot see. Your eyes will not allow you to see the same. And so there's lots of things in our life that can fool us, including ourselves and those around us. So one of the things that Covey wants you to understand is that don't let the people around you fool you. I told you the story of my two friends in high school. The smartest one and the dumbest one. The smart one became a prison counselor, and then the dumb one became a college professor, or college instructor of mechanics, but still he's a college instructor. And I told you which one did I think was I most proud of or most pleased with, let me put it that way. The so-called dumb one. Because for 12 years in the public schools, his teachers, through their grades, have been telling him, Dennis, you're stupid, you're stupid, you're stupid, you're stupid, you're stupid. Because they were grading on a bell curve. And he could not keep up with the other students in his reading and writing and some other things that he was not real good at. He was really good with his hands, and in very few classes did they grade by what he could do with his hands. And so he was just told year after year after year, Dennis, you're stupid. And yet he became a college instructor because he found a field in which he was the best, mechanics. We talked before about multiple intelligences and how some people just can do some things better than others. Some at what we'd almost consider a miraculous level at a very young age. And most of us aren't miraculous even at my age. we're good at something, pretty good at it. We work hard, we can be very good at it. And so we stretch our intelligences as best we can, but what I was saying about my friend Dennis is that the social mirror kept telling him, what the social mirror he would look into every day said, "Hi, Dennis, you're an idiot. Hi." Every day, mirror, mirror on the wall, "Dennis, you're last of all." Um, and so to overcome that social mirror was miraculous to me. There was because this input that people give to you frequently determines what you think of yourself. Very frequently does. And what you think of yourself becomes self-fulfilling prophecy. If you think you're stupid, most people who have been told all their life, like Dennis, that he's stupid, cannot possibly become a college instructor. They cannot believe that's possible. How he did, I have no idea. But he somehow shifted that social mirror and said, no, this is something I'm really good at. I can be one of the best. There was Dr. Covey talks about an accident that occurred in Great Britain. What the accident was, an accidental research project, basically, that changed the world in lots of ways. The children in this school had completed a test to see, how they ranked with each other, and the computer somehow got screwed up, and so they were sent back the results, and the smart kids were told that they were stupid, and the stupid kids, by our way of judging them, were told they were smart. And over the next few weeks, the teachers believed that because they didn't know any better. And over the next few weeks, I don't remember exactly the number. I think the video that you'll watch this week will give you the exact number. But anyway, I don't remember exactly. But because of this social mirror that was created because the teachers believed the false report, the smart kids started doing, I think they went somewhere around 15%. They did about 15% lower than they used to do once they compared the grades. And the dumb kids, so-called dumb kids, did about 15% better than they in the past they'd ever demonstrated they could do. And so just by the social mirror that was created by this false report, everything changed. Dr. Covey talks about his own son. He had a son who became a star quarterback, a straight A student, but when he was young, for some reason, he was neither of those by a long shot. He was the embarrassment of the family. Dr. Covey had 10 kids, I believe, and they were very talented kids. And a long time, forget his name, Sean, I don't know, this one child anyway, he would go out and play baseball or whatever, and he would swing the bat before the ball even got close to him. He seemed to have no coordination at all. And he did about the same on his test. He just could not handle test. And he also was socially very awkward. And so he was, to them, kind of like the embarrassment of the family. He was, out of 10 kids, you're going to have one like this, is what they kind of figured. Well, he's just our runt of the family. But then they finally just kind of said, Dr. Covey himself read about this study. And he wondered if he and his wife were sending such messages to their son unintentionally. They were trying to be very positive, and they're trying to be instructional. They're trying to help the son to live up to the family name. And they could not seem to do it. And so, like I said, he was wondering, is there something that we're doing that is hurting him? Maybe if we can just be, more positive and less critical, even in our minds, if we can just accept this son the way he is and love him just the way he is, don't care about whether he's socially awkward. Don't care if he swings the bat before the ball gets to the plate. Don't worry if if he's not the top student in his class. Don't worry about it. Love him for what he is. That's it. Encourage him, help him, yes, but don't worry about it. Just love him. And so they've very much, they talked about it a lot. You have to really outpsych yourself to do this. You have to change the way you're thinking. You have to change your paradigm about that child and no longer care about what you perceive to be deficits, which is what they did. Well, he ended up being the smartest child and the most athletic of the children. He had a chance anyway of becoming a professional athlete. When he was a star quarterback in high school in the American football team, and he was the star quarterback on the university team. He totally turned everything around, and what can you say? Was it totally because, was he just somebody that had to mature more slowly, or did their different paradigm allow him to do that? They think it was the latter, that it was their changing their paradigm of their son that allowed him to progress and gradually catch up and even surpass his brothers and sisters. So this is called self-fulfilling prophecy, is when the social mirror tells you that you're stupid, you think you're stupid, and therefore you are in a way stupid. You make yourself stupid by believing it, which is again why I admire my friend Dennis. He probably never got really good at reading and writing, but he did get really good at mechanics, and he did not allow his deficits to determine his future. Now, we talked before, I'm not going to spend much time on this slide, but we talked the other day that there are different things that people think make them who they are. Their genetics, their psychic features, their psychological features, their environment around them, the way they were raised, and so forth. And all of those things have an effect. But as I said in the last class, ultimately what he's trying to tell us is don't allow them to limit you. Don't allow the social mirror to limit you. Don't allow your genetics to limit you. Don't allow your psychological inclinations to limit you. Don't allow the environment around you to limit you. Don't care. If you're, again, as I mentioned last week, if your parents were very strict and they whipped you with a belt every day for being so bad, first off, don't accept that as part of your social mirror. And secondly, don't do it to your own kids. You don't have to. That is the inclination according to others. So this idea of being proactive means basically I'm in charge, as we talked about last week. As I said, Covey became so famous that basically, a lot of his teachings kind of permeated society in the West, especially. And so this is kind of, again, one of those things that spun off of his teachings. Where I'm residing, Boron City, that's where. But not for long, with a positive mental attitude, I can whip it. I think I'll make a lateral move. So we get to determine that. I'm going to turn this back on. I'll try to talk louder. We talked about this a little bit last week too. Again, was the Russian scientists associate with the dogs. They failed. So that when the bell rang, they would start salivating. They would expect to be fed and so forth. They did experiments like that. I've seen an experiment where they had rats. They taught rats how to play basketball. But the rat at first would be given incentive if he just got close to the basket. Even by accident, out would come a piece of food. And then after a while, he had to get closer. He had to get closer. He had to get a little closer. And he had to pick up the ball before he would get the food. And then ultimately, he had to put the ball through the basket. He taught the rats how to play basketball by using this technique of reward to stimulus and reward. But what Dr. Covey says, as I said last week, humans are not like rats. We do have the ability to, when we feel a stimulus, whatever that is, to decide our response. We don't have to have anybody else tell us what our response is going to be. That's different than all the other animals. There's some people that I admire because of how they led their lives in spite of difficulties. Viktor Frankl was a Jewish professor of psychology. In fact, he believed, he was a determinist psychologist. He believed that we were determined by our situation. And so, he basically thought nobody could change themselves. And then he and his family were thrown into a concentration camp during World War II by the Germans. And he saw many of his family members die in that concentration camp. He saw people die for just lack of will to live. They had no reason to live, so they just kind of lied down and died. In his own mind, however, as he was in the concentration camp, he would found a way to escape. Not really. In his mind, he would escape to the mountains where his family had a cabin up in the mountains. And so every day he would escape from the concentration camp in his mind and go visit his cabin up in the mountains and enjoy the fresh air and the beautiful skies and the stars in the night, all in his mind. And as he thought about this, he was escaping. He wondered if there's more he could do. And so there were a lot of smart people in the camp. So they started a university. And they started providing classes for everybody to learn new things and to have a reason to live. And so, anyway, ultimately he wrote, when he was finally freed from the concentration camp, he wrote a bestseller about this, about how we are not determined. That's what he taught before he was put in the concentration camp. He came out believing, no, we're not determined by our circumstances. We can determine our response. He came to recognize, for example, among other things, that the guards themselves to be there. So he became friends with some of the guards that were keeping them in prison, because he recognized they themselves could not choose what they wanted to do. So that's one example of somebody who decided a different reaction. Here's a stimulus, I'm going to react differently. I'm not going to lie down and die. I'm not going to be filled by hate, even though I mourn my lost loved ones. I'm not going to be filled by hate and be, just rot here in self-pity, like Garfield. I'm going to do something about it. Anwar Sadat was somewhat similar. He was the first Muslim winner of the Nobel Prize, although he was murdered by a more conservative, I guess, member of his own religion. But he was thrown in prison. One thing that all four of these people have in common is they were all thrown into prison. It makes you think that in order to become great, you have to be thrown into prison, because some of the greatest people who have ever lived went through that. prison to rethink their lives. What do I want to do with my life? Anwar Sadat was part of a group that overthrew the king of Egypt and set up a democracy under his rulership, whatever you want to call it. He, before him, even though once they overthrew the king, um, his predecessor, he was vice president. His predecessor, president, was Nasser, and they at that point only had one party. But under Sadat, they had multiple parties. He wanted to have a true democracy. But the thing that got him ultimately assassinated was that he decided he didn't want to be at war with Israel anymore. That was just hurting everybody. And so he sat down with Begin was the last name, I forget his first name, but anyway, the prime minister of Israel, and they ironed out a peace treaty. Other Muslims and countries in that area resented what he did, and ultimately somebody killed him for it. But he just could not see fighting anymore. So he changed, anyway, he made this decision, some of these decisions while he was in prison, because he was captured at one point when they were trying to overthrow the king. He was captured, thrown into prison. He was there for, I don't remember how many years, and that's when he remade his life, when he decided what he wanted his life to be. And then he became the vice president, and then after died, I guess, then he became the prime minister and the president, and Mahatma Gandhi, you've seen the movie, that in South Africa he was thrown in prison. And ultimately he was also assassinated. We know that. So it doesn't mean if you're a great person you're not going to be assassinated. It doesn't mean you're not going to go to prison, because you're going to live for what you believe in. And so Mahatma Gandhi also, he was the leader that led the people to freedom from Great Britain. They just said, no, we're not going to cooperate anymore. We're whatever, 1 billion people, and we're not going to go to work until you give us our freedom. We're not going to give you anything to take back to your home country. You give us our freedom, we can cooperate. If you don't give us our freedom, we're not going to do anything. And so basically it was their willingness to suffer a little bit in order, and he led the way, willing to fast for many days and so forth. Even jeopardize his life by fasting. And like I said, ultimately, he was also assassinated. Alexander Solzhenitsyn was a great Russian writer. Some of you may be familiar with him. Because he was a critic of the Soviet Union, he was thrown into a work camp in Siberia. Very terrible conditions. He had one piece of paper. He wrote his greatest book, was something like 800 pages, at least what I consider his greatest book, one page at a time, and then he had to memorize it because he only had one piece of paper. Each page before they erase it and start over again. I think that Solzhenitsyn said was that when somebody they can threaten you. I'm going to take away your food. I can take away your home. I can take away your money. I can take away your family. Once they take away everything, they've lost the battle. They can't take away anymore. And basically, they took away everything from him, and he became a Nobel Prize winning writer because of it. Writing one page at a time and memorizing it until he got free and could write it all down. So all those people have one thing in common, besides going to prison. They all rejected that this was the end of their life, that this was somehow going to determine their fate in a negative way, that they were going to be vindictive, that they're going to be, suicidal, they're going to be whatever these terrible conditions might lead them to be. They decided, no, I'm going to use this time to become great, basically. And they did. The proactivity, according to Covey, this is the ability to control one's environment rather than have it control you, as is often the case. Self-determination, choice, and the power to decide response to stimuli, conditions, and circumstances. So that's proactivity. So a proactive person, he takes responsibility for everything in his life. It doesn't really matter that they've thrown you into prison. He doesn't dwell on the fact that he's in prison. He dwells on the fact that what can I do to change my life and to make myself better and so forth. What freedom do I have? In the case of Franco, for example, he had the freedom to escape in his mind from prison. And he had the ability to help other people, make other people better. And so he had a service attitude. So he could continue being a servant of others to make their lives better, be more positive, trying to keep them as positive as possible under terrible circumstances, helping them be more educated so when they got out they could be more successful. He could do some things even in a prison camp where a good portion of their friends and family were being killed. A reactive person blames other people and circumstances to obstacles or problems and does not accept the opportunity or possibility that he can control it. I am what I am because my parents made me this way. I am what I am because of my circumstances. You will often hear them say something like, if only such and such, I could thus and thus. And that's a way of giving yourself an excuse. If only my wife were more supportive, I could be successful. Well, blaming it on your spouse doesn't do any good. That gives you the excuse, but doesn't give you any success, whatever it might be. If only I wasn't in prison. If only I had a better education. If only, fill in the blank. As long as you're going to say, if only I could be great, then you will never be great. You'll always find a reason to blame somebody else. So the proactive model intervenes and says it's not a direct line from stimulus to response, as Pavlov thought it was, as other psychologists have thought it was. Talking about change in paradigm. The paradigm with people like Viktor Frankl changed. No, this is not the way it has to be. You do not have to be determined by your circumstances, your genetics, your anything. You can self-determine. And so the fact that we're self-aware. I was talking about, like the scientists who think we're a video game. Well, the way I would challenge that is this very point. We're self-aware. We're totally self-controlled. The amount of programming you would need would require God, I guess, to do it because we have all options. Contrary to again, we are totally, proactivity is totally up to us. We get to choose that and we get to become what we want to become. Nobody's controlling us on that. And so if we're a video game, that's an amazing video game that he has created, that whoever it is has created a self-aware, self-determined players in the game that can use their own imagination and exercise their independent will to become what they want to become. That's kind of hard to do in programming. Very hard to. I'd say pretty much. Well, it's beyond our imagination. Well, maybe not beyond our imagination because some scientists are imagining it, but we couldn't come close to doing it. So that's why I would doubt it, is that how do you build in this total self-awareness, this total independence, this total self-determination capability in all the actors and give them all options. All options are open to them. And that's why even the scientists say the only way we can prove this is if we can find whoever did the programming, that they took a shortcut. Because we don't believe even God can do this and not take a shortcut. There are too many options. And so if we're a video game, they think they can catch him taking a shortcut someplace where we don't have self-determination, where we don't have total control of what we're doing, and so forth. I'm going to watch a short video here that talks about this. Let's. I am going to turn off this fan while we're watching it. Let me try. Okay, so you believe that? What do you think about the video?
You have a little different, how this reaction just a little bit different and change the whole day, and change your whole life. Once you determine that you're in charge of it, you don't just automatically react to something in a negative way.
Sometimes you need to think things through ahead of time. If not, this is where you need to build some skills. This doesn't come naturally, especially if you had parents that would have reacted badly, because that's what you grew up with. I happen to have good parents. I'm not saying your parents aren't good. I happen to have parents who were very much like this, very naturally, and both of them. I don't know what made them that way, and it doesn't mean they were perfect. There were times, usually my fault. Um, if they reacted badly, it was under extreme pressure. I remember one time, and I think it is because of, I can remember this happening because it was so rare. We were out in the field working, and we would, let's put this down to demonstrate what I'm talking about. We raised a lot of alfalfa that we made into hay, big bales of hay that we feed to cows, or sell it to people who did feed cows, dairy farmers and stuff. And so each of these bales, about this size, weighed somewhere close to 100 pounds. And we'd have to take it in and stack it up, and then sell it, and then somebody come and put it on their truck and take it off to feed cows with. Well, it was not always real easy to do this. I think, I wasn't young. I think probably when I was like 17 or something, I was lifting cows up. My dad was on a trailer, stacking them up on the trailer to take them in to make a put them all in place. And I remember I lost control of the bale. I did heavy. And I tried, we had hay hooks. We had a hay hook with a piece of metal that you hold on to this and it makes a little curve, and this part here. And so
And so I done that, and I listened up my dad, and it must have been this way, so I remember my right hand. I lifted up, and my hook started to come loose. And I took it out and went down again, and it went right in my dad's hat. He was wearing a hat, and when they came down through the front of his hat, right, he didn't hit me. But he kind of cursed it. The one time I had never cursed anyone. Kid, I almost put his eye out with his hand. But that's what I'm saying. That I remember because it was an awful.
And I deserved it, I guess. I mean, it was, I obviously didn't do it on purpose. But when you know, put a sharp hay hook right between somebody's eyes, it's, you know, you react kind of, you know, it's hard. That space between stimulus and response becomes very small as that hay hook goes right between your eyes. Well, I really appreciate my parents that they were uh, pretty much like what the video describes naturally. And I don't know how they became that way, but they were very good parents to me. Um, but I can understand why somebody whose parents were not patient and would react in a very negative way fairly often would have a hard time retraining themselves to be like this video suggests. It would be, for them, it'd be less natural than it should be for me. Not to say that I'm perfect at it either, but I tend to be fairly patient person because of my parents. Um, they modeled that for me. But as I said, I can imagine why for other people it would not be that easy. And it might take you quite a while to adopt. You can understand it, but actually to develop a skill to implement the 90-10 rule might be difficult, more difficult for some people than other people. And that's understandable, but that doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that particular rule, that particular strategy may take you a little bit longer because of something, the way you were raised or whatever it might be. And it might not be you know, some people are just, their parents can be very calm people and they can become very reactive for some reason. And you know, who knows why. So obviously I don't want to blame parents for everything because that's not true, obviously. Um, so let me go back. So this is whatever. So once you learn and understand the skill, doesn't mean it becomes automatic. And that's why Dr. Covey suggests that you may want to spend, you know, 1 month at a time working on one of the habits, maybe even 2 months. If it's a habit that's really hard for you, you spend 3 or 4 months on that one habit. And you'll hear him when you listen to his video. One of the first things he says, I believe it's in this video, is that being proactive controls everything, all the other habits. If you're not proactive, you're not going to master any of the habits, probably, because being proactive is the thing that gives you the impetus, gives you the courage, gives you the motivation and the belief that you can adopt all of those habits. If you're not proactive, you give up right away. Yeah, that's hard. It's hard work in building those habits in your life. Anyway, taking the initiative is and trying to figure out how to apply these habits in your life and so forth, you know, is part of it. With your interaction with other people, it's the belief that you can come up with a solution, you can sell it to other people, get other people to buy into it, and together solve a problem. It takes some effort to employ as we go through all these 7 habits to employ them. You have to, again, understand them, you have to accept them, you have to integrate them into your life, and that's not as easy as me remembering to read part of a book when I go into the restroom. That's an easy one. This is not so easy. As he points out here, it's you have to develop some muscles, so to speak, some proactive muscles. It's not just positive thinking, although positive thinking can help you do this. If you don't think positively, then you probably aren't going to do it. And so, yes, you need to be a positive thinker, but he would ridicule those who think that positive thinking is the only thing you need to be successful. That to be ultimately successful, that may be a starting point, but it's not the ending point. These habits help you change from the inside out. They may start with being a positive thinking and being proactive and building those proactive muscles. And in the process, you need to be creative and resourceful. And how do I do this? How do I change my life? It's not just a matter of brute force. You may have to figure out how to, for example, control your time better. When am I going to have time? For example, this is kind of overlaps into habit 3. And I may say it again just because I always think about it when I talk about habit 3, which is putting first things first. But think of Stephen Covey himself. 10 kids, full-time job, working on his PhD, and he had to set aside some time to write this book. If he hadn't set aside some time, and he had plenty of excuses not to spend the time writing this book. I mean, he had, even himself, he talks about how important the family is and so forth. So he had some really big reasons why he should not have taken, or why he could have easily talked himself out of allocating time to write a book. He was a very busy person. Lots of kids, a wife, things to do, people to take care of. But there's a book I read when I was younger. I don't know if you can find it now, but it says what you can do in 15 minutes a day. And it just made it, basically all it was a list of like 1,000 things you could do if all you did was dedicate 15 minutes a day to doing that. It might take you years, but you could do it. My wife is an amazing person. Her husband, first husband, was cheating on her. He even brought another woman into their own apartment and had sex with her in their bedroom, in their apartment. He was drinking too much. He was abusive, had hit her more than once. And she finally decided, this is not the life I'm going to put up with. And so she left. It was like many countries where men are given privileges that women don't have. They were living in an apartment that her dad gave them when they were married, and her husband took the apartment. So she had to move. Her dad found her a place to live that had no heat in it. So they had like a wood stove or something they could heat up, but she couldn't afford much when she moved out from her husband. Her husband just laughed at her and said, you're going to come running back to me begging for my help because you can't survive by yourself. You don't have the skills. You don't have the ability to survive by yourself, which made her all the more determined that she would. She worked really hard. She had worked 12-hour days, starting off just like cleaning other people's toilets and stuff. Well, she was working for there. They had a big energy sector. So they were, so she was basically working at a camp of workers, including foreign workers that were working to take out the energy in Kazakhstan. And so she was just started off cleaning the rooms of these workers. And gradually she did become a manager, but she still wasn't paid very much. So she was making $137 a month. 137, not very much in dollars. I mean, it was obviously different in tenge, which is their currency in Kazakhstan. But she had made the equivalent of $130 or $138 a month. She decided, I'm going to build a house with this. But here she was taking care of her kids, paying for her utilities. I think she was still living in the house that her dad, that had no heat and stuff in it, but that her dad had provided for her after her divorce, so she could keep her expenses down, but just basically eating rice and cheap stuff, not buying clothes very much. On 100 every month, she'd take out of that $137, $138. She would go buy something for her future house. It might be a bag of Adobe mix with which she could build her bricks. And so she'd buy it, and then the summertime when it's better weather, she would do that. She brick by brick, she'd build the bricks herself, put them in place. She learned how to weld metal. She learned how to do plumbing. It took her 7 years to build her house at just a few dollars a month. And her house was a pretty nice house. It's I know you guys think in meters, so in square meters, and I don't think that way, but it's a good sized house that she built while taking care of her family for $137 a month. When she told me that story, I just couldn't believe it. How do you build a house that nice? And her walls are thick like this, made out of Adobe. Her walls are almost maybe not quite a meter, but more than a half a meter wide. A very strong house. But she was just determined she was going to change her life. And while her friends were spending their money in nice clothes and going out to have fun, she was building her house. 7 years. And she was also teaching herself English, thinking that she'd get a better job, and as it turned out, she got me instead. Anyway, that's the sort of determination and reaction. Her husband said you could never do it. She did it. It took her a lot of determination, a lot of time. She had to learn new stuff. She had to work hard, but she did it. Anyway, you can tell a difference in the language of people who are reactive or proactive. I kind of suggested if somebody says, there's nothing I can do, that's just the way I am, he makes me so mad, if only, sort of like I said earlier, that's the language of a reactive person. Let's look at our alternatives. I can choose a different approach. I control my own feelings. That's the language of a proactive person. I'll upload this obviously to Moodle. I'm not going to try to read through all this, but again, some language of the difference between reactive people and proactive people. And I think as you adopt these habits, you have to adopt the language too. You have to watch what you're saying. Because as you talk, that's how you think. So you change the way you're thinking, you change the way you're talking, and then in the process, you're changing your attitude, you're changing your approach to life, you're changing your paradigm. You also start in the realm of the second set of 3 habits. You start changing your circle of concern and your circle of influence. You have a circle of concern, things that matter to you. And you have only a certain amount of a circle of influence. Usually we start off with the circle of concern being quite big and our circle of influence being quite small. And so we think we can only do so much. Our country's not being run well, our city's not being run well, whatever, I can't do anything about it. But then you become proactive and you start rallying other people to do something about it. And pretty soon you start changing your city, and people start protesting a little bit or whatever, and things start changing. If you do that, your circle of influence will grow. In fact, it will grow. I thought I might maybe put another slide in there. It can actually grow to where your circle of influence is greater than your circle of concern. In some situations, that has occurred to me, and I'm sure that occurred to Dr. Covey for sure, is that after a while, people want you to help them with their problems because they've seen that you solve all these other problems. And so their problems are not part of your concern other than you want to be nice to them. And so you get a bunch of people coming here, help me solve my problem. You solve that problem, come help me solve my problem. When they see that you're proactive, they want you as part of their life to solve their problems. Well, you have to kind of resist that a little bit because it's not part of your circle of concern. Now you might be distracted from your priorities, from the things you want to do, and really helping them because they're lazy or because they're not proactive, because they just want to find an easy way out, and you're the guy who gets things done. So they want you to help them do what they could do if they put their effort to it, if they became more proactive. And so again, as you grow, the more harder you try, the more you exercise your proactive muscles, the greater your circle of influence becomes, even to the point where it's greater than your circle of concern. There's some things, there's lots of problems. Some things you have direct control over. Some things you can affect by indirect control. For example, maybe you can't do it, and you don't have the power to do it, but maybe you can talk to somebody who does, and you can try to influence them. That's kind of more indirect control. And some things you have no control, and you accept that, at least for the time being. It may be that after you exercise your proactive muscles a little bit, you will get to the point where you can influence things that currently you have no control over. There was I want to tell a couple of stories before we end, so that's why I'm watching the clock. I may skip some slides here. Well, for one thing, you're going to watch a 50-minute video where Dr. Covey will explain the stuff himself. So I don't want to be the two stories. I don't think he tells this one story in the video. I could be wrong. But anyway, I'm going to tell you one of his stories anyway. He said there's this guy he was part of this big organization, and the CEO was not a good people person. He did not have a good relationship with his employees. In fact, there was a big rift there, and it was hurting the company. And so, but there was one person, rather than standing around the water cooler or whatever and complaining about their boss, he decided he was going to do something about it. And so he would get done with his work and he'd go in to the boss, maybe give the boss a report he was supposed to write or something. And he'd say, well, I'm caught up in my work. Is there anything I can do for you? To the boss. Now, this may seem like in America, we might call this brown nosing, kind of kissing up to the boss and trying to catch his favor, mainly for yourself. But that wasn't what his motive was. He really did want to help the company, because the company might actually fail if he didn't do it. And also, he could help his co-workers if he could change his boss or change the situation a little bit. And so rather than just complaining with his co-workers, he thought this was the way he thought maybe he could do something. And so at first his boss didn't really believe that he was sincere about wanting to help him. But as he proceeded, as they got to know each other better, the boss would give him a few things to do, and he'd come back and having done them perfectly. And so he would give him some more things to do, and he'd do them perfectly. And so pretty soon the boss became totally reliant on him. And once that happened, now he could speak for the other workers. Now he became the liaison between the boss and the workers, because the boss did not have a good did not exercise good communication with the workers, and the workers not with the boss. And so he became the conduit between the boss and the workers. And the whole company changed, because rather than standing around complaining about the boss, he did something about it. I've been in those sorts of situations myself, and it is quite amazing. When I first got to Kazakhstan, I was a new kid on the block. I didn't know what I was doing. And they asked if anybody would want to work on their annual research conference. And I thought, well, I'm not real busy right now. I haven't been given a lot of extra assignments, and I'm here by myself in Kazakhstan. So, yeah, I'll go volunteer. So I went, and I didn't think I was doing anything special, frankly. But they would ask, well, can somebody do this? And I'd say, yeah, I'll do that for you. And I did it. I mean, I didn't think I was doing it that well. I just thought, I mean, I did it the best I could, and I maybe am a little bit of a perfectionist, but I didn't think I was doing anything extraordinary. But, you know, I very frequently accepted assignments, and I did them. And so they knew they could depend on me. So we got to the last week, and this was the first time it ever struck me that somehow they had become dependent on me, kind of like this guy going to his boss. And I didn't realize it until the last week. When we had our last organizational meeting before the conference, they said, okay, we have 7 things we need to do. Ken, we want you to do 4 of them. And so there were 12 people in the room. They assigned me to do 4 of them and the other 12 people to do 3 of them. And I thought, now that's strange. But I mean, I appreciated the fact that they trusted me to be the one to do them, and they didn't trust anybody else, apparently. And so just by being dependable, that relationship grew. And I guess background you should know, this was set up by the College of Business. There are 2 colleges at the university, the College of Business and the College of Social Sciences. As a journalism professor, I was in the College of Social Sciences, and the conference had been set up by the College of Business. And I'll get back to why that's relevant, but I didn't see any difference. It's a conference for the whole university and for all the people we would invite. So anyway, the day of that first conference came up, and I got a phone call from, I'm not sure which one was first, but I got 2 phone calls actually separately. One from the dean of the College of Business and one from the chairman of the conference. And both of them said, Ken, we'll be starting our conference here a little bit later. You have to be the MC, you know, the master of ceremonies. And I said, what? I have to be the MC? You're the chairman, you know, to the one. I said, you're the chairman of the conference. You should be the MC. He said, no, you have to be the MC. I said, okay. And then I get a call. The dean of the college didn't realize the other guy had already called. The dean of the college calls me up, says, Ken, you have to be the MC. I said, you're the dean of the college. You should be the MC. He said, no, you have to be the MC. So I was the MC. I didn't do a particularly good job because I'm not a naturally good MC, frankly. And they only gave me like an hour to prepare to be the MC. But afterwards, they had like everybody that was at the conference came out, and we stood on some stairs to have a photo. And people started yelling, Ken, come up to the front. You're in charge of this. Ken, come up to the front. And I said, I'm not in charge of this. I just basically showed up to put away the chairs. I'm not in charge of anything. Anyway, ultimately, I was the first person ever not in the business college to become the chair of the conference. And for 2 years in a row, they made me the chair. Anyway, so my point is if you're proactive, you don't have to be spectacular. I'm not spectacular, but I am dependable. When I say I'm going to do something, I do it. I'm try hard. I have some pretty good skills, but I'm not spectacular. I'm just a hard worker. I'm the guy lifting bales up to my dad and nearly killing him with a hay hook. But I work hard. And you can do that too. You find if you're the person that shows up and they can depend on, you will go up in the ladder because they can depend on you. Because there are not that many people they can depend on. The other story I want to tell real quick, I have to get through here. I'll just go ahead and to the point as quick as I can. We talked a lot about this stuff already. Actually, it's a different place. I'm going to go to a different. Okay. So this is a story of Johnny the Bagger. This was told by a Barbara Glantz, who was a customer service specialist. And so I'm telling it in her story, in her words. A few years ago, I was hired by a large supermarket chain to lead a customer service program to build customer loyalty. During my speech, I said, every one of you will be making a difference and create memories for your customers. Oops. There it goes. For your customers. During my, create memories for your customers that they will motivate them then to come back. Put your personal signature on your job. Think about something you can do for your customer to make them feel special, a memory that will make them come back. About a month later, after I had spoken, I received a call from a 19-year-old bagger named Johnny, a bagger, somebody who just puts the groceries in the bag, so to speak. He proudly informed me that he was a Down syndrome individual. So he had Down syndrome, which means he was a little bit mentally delayed, you could say. And he told me his story. I like what you talked about, he said, but at first I didn't think I could do anything special for my customers. After all, I'm just a bagger. Then I had an idea, Johnny said. Every night after work, I'd come home and find a thought for the day. If I can't find a saying I like, he added, I just think one up. When Johnny had a good thought for the day, his dad helped him to set it up on the computer and print out multiple copies. Johnny cut out each quote and signed his name on the back. Then he'd bring them to work the next day. When I finished bagging someone's groceries, I'd put my thought for the day in their bag and say, thanks for shopping with us. It touched me to think that this young man with a job most people would say is not important had made it important by creating precious memories for all of his customers. A month later, the store manager called me. You won't believe what happened. When I was making my rounds today, I found Johnny's checkout line was 3 times longer than anyone else's. It went all the way back down the frozen food aisle. So I quickly announced, we need more cashiers, get more lanes open. As I tried to get people to change lanes, no one would move. They said, now I'm distracted here. They said, no, that's okay. We want to be in Johnny's lane. We want his thought for the day. The store manager continued, it was a joy to watch Johnny delight the customers. I got a lump in my throat when one woman said, I used to shop at your store once a week, but now I come in every time I go by because I want to get Johnny's thought for the day. A few months later, the manager called me again. Johnny has transformed the store. Now when the floral department has a broken flower or an unused corsage, they find an elderly woman or a little child and pin it on them. Everyone's having a lot of fun creating memories. Our customers are talking about us, they're coming back, and they're bringing their friends. A wonderful spirit of service spread throughout the entire store. And all because Johnny chose to make a difference. Johnny's idea wasn't nearly as innovative as it was loving. It came from his heart. It was real. That's what touched the customers, his peers, and those that read the story. Great service comes from the heart. Will you be a Johnny today? One thing I can tell you from this chapter is that if you're proactive, you will be 5,000 somebody who's not proactive. Think about that a second. 5,000% more effective than somebody who's not proactive. When I first read that, I thought that was hyperbole. That was an exaggeration. And then I thought about Johnny. Who changed that store? It was Johnny. If Johnny hadn't changed the store, nobody would have. He was the proactive one. He was not the smartest one. He was not the most talented one. Far from it. He was the proactive one. He was me and confidence. Stalling through my not good, maybe, not real talented, but showing up and being dependable. That's Johnny. Taking it seriously, being proactive. Can being proactive make you 5,000% more effective? I think it can. I think a lot of things in my life tell me this is true. Things that I've accomplished that only were accomplished because I was proactive naturally. I don't know why I was, but I was. That I believed I could do things that I shouldn't have believed. Kind of like Will Smith said, you have to be a little delusional. I was a little delusional. You might say Johnny was a little delusional, that we thought we could change things, and we tried. And by trying, we did. So think about that. Watch the 50-minute video. What proactivity can do to change your life. Because that's where it all starts. You have to believe it. You have to believe that. You have to tell yourself it doesn't matter. Everything against me. I'm the president. My parents did something to me. I don't have any money. I'm not very smart. Like whatever it is that you tell yourself, that some people tell themselves that if you choose not to do anything, forget about that. You can be fine and make a difference. You can be technically the dumbest one on earth. You can be the most effective one on earth. Because you're proactive. And all those people are proactive. They're smarter, they're more talented, they're not proactive. It makes 5,000% difference. And I now believe that is absolutely true. The more I think about it, the more examples I can think about it, I believe it. Okay, thank you. If you have any questions or problems that you need to deal with, I'll be up here for a while. Thank you. Thank you.